Thanks for joining us on our streaming service for your First Alert Drought Report. I'm your First Alert meteorologist, Callie Zanandri. So how much did this recent round of rain and snow help Colorado's drought? Snow isn't unusual in May, but this much snow is. On average, Denver receives 1.4 inches of snow during the month of May. But at DIA, where official records are kept, 5.8 inches of snow fell from the latest storm. And while it's a welcome sight, it's not enough to erase what's been a historic snow drought. The good news is this system did help improving conditions across parts of the Front Range and mountains. But keep in mind, the drought monitor is released every Thursday morning, and the data cutoff is Tuesday morning. That means much of this week's rain and snow is not yet reflected in the latest drought map. Portions of the north and central mountains remain under exceptional drought. The Denver metro area continues to sit in extreme drought, and conditions did improve from moderate to abnormally dry across portions of Teller, Fremont, El Paso, and Pueblo counties. Now, in the face of drought, many homeowners are thinking about how to create beautiful yards while using less water. Joining us is CSU Extension Sustainability Landscape State Specialist Darren Davidson. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, well, Mother's Day is the unofficial green light for people to start planting. What tips do you have about putting plants in place that conserve water?
Yeah, so we had this snowstorm just before Mother's Day coming up this weekend. Thinking about your plant palette and choosing plants that are appropriate for your site are really going to make a big difference in your gardening.
What about soil?
Soil is super important, so it is the foundation of our gardens. So understanding your soil, actually getting a soil test, which is a pretty simple process to go through. You collect soil in whatever your area you're going to garden, send it in to CSU has a soil testing lab, and you're going to learn some key things about your soil that will support the plants that you want to then put in your garden.
So with soil being the foundation, selecting the right plant for the right place is key.
Absolutely, yep.
And talk about sustainable landscaping. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so sustainable landscaping, it's really just best practices. But one thing that is key is we're looking at our landscape in a holistic way. So we're balancing all the factors. Some people think about water saving, so they're just focusing on xeriscape, or they just want to support pollinators, so they want to increase flowers. But for example, if you put a bunch of flowers to support pollinators, but those are really water-loving plants, then you're not accomplishing the water savings goal. So the sustainability lens means you're just balancing all those factors.
Now, what about grass that looks great but doesn't use much water?
Yeah, we definitely have some varieties that can do that. So I will say Kentucky bluegrass, you know, a lot of times we actually overwater that. So paying attention to how much you're actually putting down can save you water. But if you want to shift to something that uses less water, there's the native buffalo grass. It doesn't handle as much foot traffic as well, and it doesn't green up at the same time as Kentucky bluegrass, but that's an option. And Tahoma 31 is another option. That's actually a cold hardy Bermuda grass. People are having a lot of luck with that one.
All right, now using irrigation technology to reduce water use is an important part of sustainable landscaping. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so irrigation systems have come a long way in the last decade plus. And so everything from more efficient water distribution, so the heads that are actually a part of your system, to the clocks that you use to program your irrigation. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the user. So really understanding how your irrigation system works and not just setting it and forgetting it, but watering when we actually need the moisture and not when we're having precipitation.
Now, to reduce water waste, you also mentioned mulch is a great idea, and it also can fill in some bare spaces as well.
Absolutely, yeah, mulch is really key. So whether you're using an organic material mulch like wood chips or inorganic like a squeegee or a pea gravel, if you have a nice thick 3 to 4 inch layer, it's going to help not only protect the root zones of the plant and protect the soil from compaction, it can also hold some of that moisture in the ground.
If someone wants to make a change, what's your top suggestion?
Well, I would say I have two. One is know how much water you're putting down, right? We have to know what we're doing before we can make a change. And then the other is thinking about what your goals for your landscape are and really understanding how you want it to function, whether it's you need a play space for kids and dogs, or you want to have it be more beautiful or support pollinators, and then figuring out how all of those things can kind of work together to give you your most satisfying and successful garden space.
And you said irrigation is also a big key of this, and that you might even want to look at your system and really take aim at just how precise you want to be with that.
Yeah, so there's something you can do called an irrigation audit, which maybe sounds a little intimidating, but it's not. Essentially what you do is you find uniform containers like yogurt cups or tuna cans. You actually put them out in your yard, whether it's perennial beds or lawn. You run your irrigation system and see how much water is actually being delivered. So if you do it for 15 minutes and you get 1/4 of an inch, then you know over the course of an hour you're putting down an inch of water. And then you can start to play with that by dialing it back or increasing it depending on your plant palette and the amount of precipitation we're getting.
So with sustainable landscaping, a lot of people, I think, sometimes get scared off because they think it's just going to be rock and cactus. But you're saying if that's your thing, that's great. But otherwise, you can have some beautiful plants, some beautiful color in your yard.
Absolutely, yeah. So, xeriscapes, which people know, a lot of people know that term, that really is focusing on dry landscapes. But we can have, if we choose the right plants, then the planting density that you use can be similar to what people think of as like a traditional landscape. So you're going to have some spots of exposed mulch, but you're still going to have plenty of plants in there, bringing lots of color and boosting that curb appeal.
Well, Darren Davidson, thank you so much for the tips on creating a garden that thrives on minimal water, because I think that's what we'll all be doing this spring and summer for sure. Well, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week for your First Alert Drought Report.